Hello. Welcome, everyone. If you are here for Reverend Elder Cecilia Eggleston's Town Hall meeting, you are in the right place. Let us open up in prayer. Jeremiah 29:11 tells us that God has a plan for us that's filled with hope and a future. Hope, the expectation of good health, good fortune, and good relationships. Hope breeds optimism and feelings of well-being. Hope is about growth. Hope looks forward towards the horizons. Hope pulls us closer together. If God is for us, then who can be against us? God wants us to succeed and have a full life. As we go about building relationships, let us pray that God continues to lead us and guide us around every bend. God, help us to remember that when we follow you and live into your blessings and favor, that it is then when we experience true success. God, be with Cecilia this evening, that she may bring your hope to us. May we all come away full of hope. All these things we ask in the mighty name of Jesus, the Christ of God. Amen.
Amen.
Brendan, are you doing the slides? Sorry. So we have Reverend Cecilia. Thank you for your sacrifice, being here at midnight to your midnight, our evening. We appreciate the consideration. We will have
pleasure to be here.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Just saying, pleasure to be here. Delighted to be here.
Thank you. We will have a short introductory statement by Reverend Elder Cecilia, and then we'll have a time for question and answers. This time will be moderated by our own Brendan Boone, and all questions and responses will be added to the FAQs page on the MNC website within a week or 10 days. So be sure to post all your questions on the left-hand side. It says questions only, please, and then we'll leave the chat box for just chats.
One correction, we're only going to be posting the unanswered questions that we're going to give to the candidates, but we will be, along with the unanswered questions that we're going to ask Cecilia to answer if we don't get to them, we'll also share the 3 links to the 3 candidate forums. So for those who were not able to attend the first 2, you can listen to all those questions.
And any questions that may come up, be sure to send them to the MNC that we may parse them out to each of the candidates. All right, I think we're ready for Reverend Cecilia. We'll have a few moments for an opening statement.
Okay, thanks very much, Velma. I just seen the feed there that there's been a school shooting outside Denver this afternoon, so we just hold those families, those teachers, and that community in prayer at this time. You know, it's endlessly shocking that we keep hearing about these events and the trauma that it inflicts on a community and everyone around. So prayers for people in Denver this afternoon. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to talk with all of you. I have to say it's a very weird experience to be sitting in a small village in the southwest of England, imagining you all the way around the world. And so what I've been thinking about is if I came to your church, you know, how would it be to have the town hall meeting in your church? So, you know, for some of you that would be a big sanctuary, there'd be lots and lots of people, I'd be way at the front, you know, there'd be PowerPoint presentations. For some of you it would be in the fellowship hall, we maybe just be gathered around a circle of chairs, and you know, some of us are just more familiar with suitcase church, you know, we're there on a Sunday and then we disappear, and so you know, we'd be maybe having a shared supper, a potluck supper in somebody's home, and then just sitting around and chatting in quite an informal way. So, you know, I don't know where you are or who you're watching this with, but, you know, I want to make you feel as though I'm sitting right with you and directly talking to you. There's lots of things that we've already talked about as moderator candidates: structure and vision and diversity and global outreach and all of those things. And those are all really important, and I look forward to answering more questions about those things tonight. But I want to talk a little bit, first of all, about fear. Those of us that have led the CLM program or have been a participant in the CLM program, you know, we talk about fear in that. And fear can stand for forget everything and run. So you're faced with a grizzly bear. I'm sure you're not meant to run away from grizzly bears, but you know, if you see a real and present danger, forget everything and run. But often our fears are based on false evidence appearing real. And fear can show itself as concern, as questions, as doubt. Yeah, and these last 3 years, for many of us, have been some points for that. We've had concerns, we've had questions, we've had doubts. And Velma's articulation of what hope means was fantastic, because in this moment, we can be hopeful. And I just want to remind us all, you know, of all the different things that we have gone through together as a movement, as a global denomination, you know, and each of those critical points, there may have been some of us who thought, oh, you know, is this it for us? Is this the end for us? You know, think about those early days when Troy was marching and, you know, going on hunger fast outside the capital, state capital in Florida. You know, and the day that the mother church burnt down, and how that must have been for everybody. You know, people who really thought, you know, is this God's wrath on us? But, you know, we survived and we kept going. And then we come to being more organized, and, you know, we remember after the last general conference, which for some of us was very difficult, you know, people remembered the Houston conference, and that was back in 1981 apparently, and that was when we made the decision to use inclusive language. You know, and Reverend Elder Gene White used to tell the story of people saying, you know, don't take away our Jesus. There was a real sense of like, what are we doing, and is this the end for us? But now, you know, inclusive language is part of who we are, and it's still controversial. But we took that step because we believed it was important. And we went through and are still going through the effects of HIV and AIDS. And at different moments, for pastors like Nancy Wilson and Jim Matulski and so many others, you know, just watching it sweep through their congregations. And you know, are we going to survive this? Are we going to thrive ever again? And I can remember reading a brilliant sermon or hearing a brilliant sermon from Jim Matulski about resurrection and about life coming back to San Francisco. And it was one of the best examples of resurrection that I've ever heard, and really spoke to me. So each time we come through this, and each time we grow stronger. You know, and some people would have thought when Troy retired that this perhaps was the beginning of the end. But we keep planting new churches. We keep transforming lives. We keep making a difference in the world. And some of you will be familiar with a speaker called Lisa Nichols. And, you know, she talks about fear as fuel. And she talks about making that leap where you have your fear in one hand, your doubts and your concerns and your questions in one hand, but then on the other hand you have your passion. And it's not that you don't jump until you have no fear. You carry your fear with you, but you jump with your passion. And we think of all those times that we have faced a critical moment in our history, and we have jumped with our fear and our questions and our concerns and our passion. You know, and we're at this point now. I really believe in the future of MCC. I believe that there is so much that we can still do, and we're still called to do. And we shouldn't let our fear or our concerns about structure or systems or finance or any of those things stop us, because the only thing that's certain in our future just now is God is already there, and God is expecting us to show up and do fantastic things just as we have already done. And everyone who is on this call tonight is here because you care. You know, whether it's 9 o'clock in the morning in Sydney or 1 o'clock in the morning in Germany or whatever time it is in Brazil. We are here because we care and we have passion for this movement, and we are called to change the world. So over the next 45 minutes or so, I want to hear about your passion, your questions, and I hope that you can hear mine, and the faith that we share and the joy that we have in making a difference in the name of Jesus. So fire away with your questions. Brendan, please.
Thank you, Cecilia. So we'll start with the questions. I want to remind you, if you have questions, please put those questions in the questions only box that's on the screen. And as we're waiting for those to fire up, Cecilia, I want to ask you some questions that have been submitted to the MMC to ask all the candidates. The first question is this: in the desired qualifications and criteria for prospective candidates for moderator, one of the personal qualities and characteristics is a competent strategist who is able to present a compelling picture of what the future of MCC could look like. What is your compelling picture of what the future of MCC could look like?
Okay, thank you for that question. I think the first thing for us to remember is we are already brilliant. I know people looked at the slate of moderator candidates, and one way of looking at us is saying, yeah, it's full of old white people, and that is one reading. Another reading would be look, there is a lay person. This is a fantastic thing. There are 2 women. There are more women than men on the slate. MCC offers fantastic opportunities to lay people, to people of colour, to people with varying abilities, and we offer that all over the world. And we have this unique experience of being founded in and reaching beyond the LGBTQI community. I know people who go to churches in the UK where women are not allowed to be in worship, where we would not be welcome as queer folk. So one of the things I hope for in our future is that we embrace how brilliant we are and how far we have come and how we have led Christian thought. We have this roar of a lion, and other people use inclusive language. Other people are considering issues around sexuality and spirituality because of our ministry. And so in our future, I want us to fully embrace how brilliant we already are. I see us being continuing to be at the cutting edge of whatever we need to be at the cutting edge of. There will always be people at the margins. So who are those people and how can we help them? What is it that is the new need that is emerging that we don't know yet? We don't know what the need is going to be in 5 years' time, but we need to be ready for that. So we need to have structures and systems and opportunities for resourcing ministry that are flexible, that are responsive, that are quick. In our future, we will have enough leaders. They will be trained and they will be equipped. And some of those will be clergy and some of them will be laity. But we will have enough. But in order to have enough, we need to start planning for that now. And as we continue to move with our passion, passion is attractive. Conviction is attractive. And we will have all the resources that we need. We will have the different things that we need, the financial resources. We're going to attract those because people are going to see what we're doing and they want to be part of that. The Lilly Foundation has invested a huge amount in the future of the leadership of MCC, and they wouldn't do that if they couldn't see something brilliant in us. So in our future, all of those things we can choose to put there and we can choose to work towards them. And we can be that light. We can continue to be the organization, the movement that other organizations, other movements want to partner with. We can continue to be at the cutting edge of theological discourse. We continue to change the world through our passion for justice. Because if we ever stop having that passion, then we're going to lose who we are as MCC. We are not a passive sit in the pews and do nothing kind of church. We are a get out there, make a difference, roll our sleeves up kind of church, and that is going to continue to be there. And issues like structure and representation and global reach, all of those things are very important. And we need to address those. And in our future, we're going to keep addressing those because we're going to keep changing and shifting to emerge into the world as it changes and shifts too, because the world is not going to sit still. So we need to work out ways that we can move quickly and really make a difference in the moment and galvanize each other and support each other. And I also just see a future where we're really clear about what we want from each other, and that we have open discourse, and that we celebrate our diversity and we see it as a strength in new ways, and that we hold that balance between being unified and being diverse. So I think the future is very bright for us. It doesn't matter that other churches are becoming more inclusive. There will always be a place for new. There will always be a place to be on the edge. And we are always going to be brave enough to go there, because that's our foundation. That is who we are and who we will continue to be.
Thank you, Cecilia. The next question reads as follows. There are several churches within MCC, between 10 and 20, that have no leadership due to the church's inability to pay a pastor full-time or even part-time. Many of our pastors are in need of a pastor that can help them pay their bills, especially student loans, and can afford to help these churches. What are your plans for working with the churches who are in need of pastoral leadership and unable to afford to pay even a part-time pastor?
This is an experience that I'm very familiar with, because many of our churches in Europe, this is their day-to-day reality. There are very few MCC pastors in Europe that have been able to have a full-time stipend. I was on a part-time stipend. It's about intention and it's about commitment. Okay, the attention has to be on both sides. It has to be on the part of the congregation. So these congregations may not be able to pay a stipend yet, but the intention has to be, we will. And what sometimes happens with new pastors, perhaps inexperienced pastors or pastors who are doing church planting, they say, oh no, it's okay, I don't want a stipend. And then in a year's time, they're going, well, they still haven't paid me anything. So there has to be intention on both sides, that the congregation will pay something and that the pastor will expect to be paid something. Now, if the pastor wants to put that straight back in the plate, they can do that, but the intention has to be there. And you start off small. Reverend Elder Jean White, she started a church plant, and she was used to getting a stipend. She'd pastored one of our bigger churches. And so what the congregation did was each month they increased the budget for her stipend by £10 a month. So in January, the stipend was £10 a month. In February, it was £20 a month. By December, it was £120 a month. Now, that's still not enough to live on, but it's enough to pay one bill a month. It's enough to pay fuel for a month. And it shows intent and commitment. When I started at Northern Lights MCC, I was on 21 hours a week. When I finished 9 years later, I was on 32 hours a week. But that was intentional on the part of the board and on the part of stewardship of the congregation. And that also means that you look at the budget and you say, okay, are there some things that we're now not going to do in order that we can do this? So for some congregations, they will never be able to pay a huge amount, but the intention to pay something is really important. And so I would work with those congregations, work with staff who support those congregations to set those plans in place, to have good preaching and teaching about stewardship and giftedness and how we have the ability each to be generous. And then we would work on a plan to make something good happen out of this.
Thank you. The next question is this. What is your personal style of leadership?
Yeah, this is quite a difficult one to answer, isn't it? Because, you know, I think other people are the people who tell you what your leadership style is. You know, it's all very well saying, oh, you know, I believe I'm a humble servant leader. You know, you have to ask other people. First thing is, I lead. You know, I'm really clear about that. I lead. And sometimes I will lead from the front because that's sometimes what is needed. Oftentimes, I will lead in a very collaborative way. I'll listen to other people. I will hear that. You know, I have an internal phrase or saying, listen, learn, lead. So what don't I know? What are other people expert in? You know, congregations are full of experts. They know stuff from themselves and their personal lives, they have experience in their work capacity, they have had their own faith journey. There's so much wisdom in our people. So what can I learn from them? And gathering those ideas and listening, and then acting upon those ideas and getting consensus. You know, it's really important that people see their own ideas and thoughts reflected back in the wider picture. You know, and I also seek out honourable opposition. You know, sometimes there are people that I profoundly disagree with, but I know absolutely their heart and their head and their passion for what I am working on is the same as mine. They just come at it from a different perspective. So I look for those people to hear what they have to say and to learn from them. And anyone who has worked with me knows that I'm just passionate about building up people. That's the thing that gives me the greatest joy. You know, I really believe in the priesthood of all believers. You know, I was a lay district coordinator, I was a lay elder. I really believe in that, and I believe that every single person is gifted and called, and every single person has spiritual gifts. And, you know, I work really hard with people to see what those are. And I'm also really clear that we're all called to different things. So if I think you're really not called to that and you're really not gifted for that, I will tell you. And I will find the thing that you are gifted and called to do and help you to do that if you want to. Am I a servant leader? Yes, I think I am. And do I love giving affirmation and kudos to other people for what they have done? Definitely so. You know, I love lifting people up and being able to acknowledge what they have done. I believe that I am a good listener. I believe that I really can read most people well and see what's going on for them and be empathetic with them. And I care passionately about folk and their journey and what they're going through and how I can be supportive and engaging with that. But ask around. You know, if you don't know me, find people who have worked with me, and there will be people who find me a difficult person to work with. So, you know, that's okay. I'm not going to be everybody's flavour, but just know that I want to work with you and I want to engage with you.
Thank you. The next question. Can you tell us why you resigned your position as an active elder some years ago?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was a combination of things, really. One is that the workload was phenomenal. What happened with district coordinators was that we were like the middle management, and the middle management position effectively disappeared. So the regional elders were then doing two jobs. We were being the elder, but we were also doing a lot of the work the district coordinators had done. Region 4 is enormous geographically, but actually the number of MCCers in Region 4 was probably less than some of the congregations that are in the US. You know, I did my clergy placement at MCC San Diego, and MCC San Diego was bigger than all of Region 4. So some of the things that we were trying to do, we just couldn't do because there weren't enough folk. And also many of the people who'd served very faithfully in the European district just felt like their time had passed. So for me, it felt that I wasn't quite ready for that position. And I think there's also something about needing a fresh start. One of my colleagues remarked later that if I had been a regional elder for a different region, expectations might have been different, and some of the dynamics that then played out might have been different. And that would have been a fresh start for me, and I would have come into a new environment with people having a different expectation of me. Whereas I think working with some of the people I'd already worked with for a long time, it was difficult for them to make a shift to the new regional structure and the role of the new regional elder, and that played out in some ways in very difficult and unhelpful behaviour. The culminating thing for me was I was mugged when I was in South Africa, and I broke my hand fighting off the 2 young men that were mugging me. And for me that was just, you know, it was the final thing that said, you know, for me now I need to stop. I need to look and see what God is calling me to. And, you know, it was a very difficult thing to say, you know, I need to stand down now. But it was absolutely the right thing. And subsequent things that unfolded in my personal life and in my ministry is like, yeah, you know, it was a good experience. Working with the African churches was just a complete joy, and you know, filled something in my heart that has been there for a very long time. You know, I was very honoured to continue to work with the European churches and to see growth and change there. But I think, you know, it was, for me, it was perhaps not quite the right time, and you know, it was a time then of real reflection about my own call and whether I'd misheard that call as elder, and you know, what does it mean to be elder in our denomination. And so what I would say now is that you know, I fully embrace being an elder. Being an elder is important to me, and I think for me what it's about is that spiritual leadership role. It's about that voice of wisdom, it's about that voice of experience, and so it's not so much about the tasks, which the regional elder was. It was very much about task. For me, it's much more about presence, and to be an elder, to guide, to inspire, to support, to pastor, to hold in prayer, to lift up the people, I think is the role of an elder in these times now, and you know, I fully embrace that, and I see that very much as my call, whether or not you know, I become the moderator.
Thank you. Next question. What challenges and opportunities do you see being a clergy person in the role of public theologian as moderator of MCC?
Well, I think there are always people who are going to question our theology. They're going to question our theology from you know, sexuality and spirituality, the role of women, the role of lay people. For me, it's about holding what we believe to be true and doing that in a way that's respectful to the person who may be opposing me or having a different point of view. I think there are challenges in that. Perhaps sometimes, you know, I remember Nancy Wilson saying she was somewhere and talking about her interpretation of scripture and seeing, you know, for example, the story of Ruth and Naomi, and, you know, a young man at the back of the room raising his hand and saying, well, you know, this is all very interesting, but does anyone else believe this apart from you? So, you know, more and more theologians believe this, more and more denominations and churches believe this. So it's actually garnering that support, actually referencing them, and also saying this is part of our history and part of our legacy. The opportunity is always to spread the good news. You know, there are thousands and thousands of people who still don't know this stuff, and you know, one of the questions that we keep being asked is, you know, is there still a place for MCC? Whatever teenagers are committing suicide because of their sexuality and their spirituality, there is still a space for MCC and for our theology, so that we can espouse it in so many different ways and show it in so many different ways. Yeah, I think that's what I have to say on that at the moment. I'm sure there's other things to say.
All right. Thank you so much. Next question. While there are similarities between organizational leadership and spiritual/church leadership, there are also significant differences. Can you share a few ways spiritual leadership is different than general organizational leadership? Not better, just different.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Yeah, that's true. Well, undermining everything in leadership, or undergirding rather than undermining, that was unfortunate, wasn't it? Is that whole thing of values. You know, and my values are leadership and integrity. So, you know, whether I am dealing with the budget, whether I am dealing with preparing a sermon, whether I am dealing with leading a protest on the street, my values need to be the same. And there are difficult decisions to be made in all of those arenas. So, you know, for example, you know, telling somebody that they're not to, you haven't chosen them for a ministry position, or, you know, in terms of staff, is actually saying this position is going to be made redundant. Doing that with integrity and with leadership is the same as standing at the front and challenging people to really live out their best selves in their faith. So it's an interesting question. I think organizational relationship somehow is very concrete. Organizational leadership is very concrete, and sometimes spiritual leadership can be a bit more ethereal, a bit harder way to see where you've made a difference. I think that they have actually a lot in common. I'm trying to think of an area in my life where they have been different and where I've had to set one aside to do the other, and I actually can't think of an example just now. But I appreciate that fact about not better, just different.
Okay. Thank you. Just want to let everybody know we have about 20 minutes left for questions. There are a couple of things we need to do housekeeping at the end of the webinar, so we'll press on. I just want to give you a heads up on that. Next question, Cecilia. Do you have a plan for attracting millennials to the church and ministering to their very special needs?
Yeah, I was talking to a young person about this on Sunday, actually, and his take on it was that as a young person he felt welcome to the table but wasn't heard while he was there. What I have to say is it's very important, and we need to do this. What we need to look at is who is doing it successfully. This is, I am not a millennial. I don't know what's going to be attractive for them. What I do know is that our young people are very passionate, and there must be ways of actually highlighting that. You know, would it be a good idea to have something like a lead that was, the lead program is excellent? Would there be a case for having a particular stream for young people so that they can see themselves in ministry? Would there be a possibility of having something like a youth council? Because if we want young people to see that they are important, then they need to see themselves reflected in our structure, in our processes, can see how they can input into the voice of the denomination and the voice of the movement just as much as everybody else. You know, would we want to have a youth or a millennial person specially designated as an elder? You know, I was 26 when I started an MCC, and I helped to start a church. Nancy Wilson was in her 20s when she was an elder. You know, young people and the youth and energy of youth has been foundational to getting things started in our denomination. So, you know, we need to find ways of capturing it. I'd be very interested to hear from young people what they want and how they want to do it, because, you know, if they have their own, there are ways of communicating that I don't use and they do, and they are expert in. So I would want to have some kind of dialogue with these particular folk and to see what's going to work for you and how we can do that. And what I would say is that I know that the OFLD has had led young leaders retreats before, and they've been very successful, but more recently sign-up hasn't been good, and the OFLD has tried a variety of different mechanisms for that. So, you know, there has been good efforts made, but the way we do things perhaps have shifted, and you know, so it's learning what will work and how we can get engaged. But I'd be really interested to hear from anyone who wants to get in touch about their ideas and what would work and what we can do with that.
Thank you. Next question. What makes you passionate about being the UM MCC moderator?
When Nancy Wilson was first elected as moderator, I went to her and told her that I felt called to be moderator one day. And I've just held that call. You know, and going back to the earlier question about me stepping down as elder, and that was one of the things, is I felt so called to be moderator. The fact that I stepped down as elder, you know, really had me questioning all of that. I'm not an ambitious person. I don't have a career path, you know, to the great chagrin of my family. I've done all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But I feel really passionately about our denomination. I've always been passionate about the denomination and about what we can do around the world, which I just find is extraordinary. You know, I've seen Reverend Troy Perry in South Africa addressing our folk there, and I wonder what that's like for him to travel the world knowing, you know, he started this whole thing in his lounge in Huntington Beach. What a phenomenal thing. So I'm passionate about it because I believe we can really make a difference. I believe that people are crying out around the world for our message, and I believe that, you know, we are brilliant and we can make a difference. And whether we make a difference to one person or 10 people or 1,000 people, you know, we can't fail if we're doing what God has called us to. And that's the basic work of feeding the hungry and freeing the oppressed. You know, we are a church of liberation, isn't it? Isn't that fantastic? And I just, you know, I love traveling. I love going to different cultures and meeting different people. I love seeing how diverse we are. And yet, in the midst of that, we have this communion table where everyone is welcome. And whichever country you go to, and however communion is celebrated in any of those congregations, we have that common thread. And I just think that's brilliant. And I look at the photographs of our people around the world, and I can see, you know, those common threads even in the most disparate and difficult of places. And that's why I'm passionate about it. And for me just now, you know, for me just now, it feels absolutely that this is my time. You know, and Tony and Liz are both fantastic candidates. They really are, and if either of them became moderator, I'd be honoured to do anything that they ask me to in service to support them in their ministry or the wider denomination. But, you know, we keep talking about how we can reach out to the global church, how we can stop being so US-centric and all of these different things. And I certainly don't want you to vote for me just because I'm not US. But if you're looking for you're looking at all three candidates, then I would say this. For the last 50 years, we have had moderators who come out of large churches, either in Florida or in California. And if we are going forward in a new way and in a different way, and we're embracing who we are globally, then for me, this is time. This is time to show our intention, just like a small congregation putting an extra £10 a month in the budget, having intention to say, yes, we are beyond the US. Yes, we see ourselves as a global movement. Having me as moderator may show that intention and may make that shift that I hear that we want to make.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Can you give us an example of a time when you have been part of a significant change in an organizational structure and how you handled it?
Yes, well, I was district coordinator when we were looking at the whole issue of becoming regions. And, you know, that was a challenging time personally and professionally, because it became very clear that district coordinators would all go. So I and many of my colleagues knew that we would be made redundant. The position would go. So it's managing that in faith and trust, and at the same time is really wanting to help congregations understand the important choices before them and why I personally believed in the regional structure. And what was important to me was the fact that the districts were very uneven. So districts were built around clusters of churches, and so some districts were very well resourced because the churches within them were large and well resourced. And some districts had part-time district coordinators. They had much more limited resourcing. And then you had a whole group of churches that weren't attached to a district, so they didn't really even have a place at the table. The whole point of regions was that every church would be in a region and every church would have a regional elder. And so there would be still that representation. So for me, it was about, is this the best thing for the denomination at large? Is this the best thing for most people? And how can I explain the shifts that will take place so that congregations or individuals who would feel that somehow they were losing something because of the shift could still see what they had, but also how other people would and other congregations would be gaining something that they already had. You know, that whole thing of privilege. One of the times sometimes that tells us that we have privilege is we're frightened what we will lose. So for some people in the European district, there were questions about, well, does this mean we're going to be less well resourced? What's going to be taken away from us? And so it was answering those questions, answering those fears, and being open about what the change would mean, but also reminding people about how we had benefited from that structure and how what we wanted was other churches, in the case of Region 4, churches based in Africa, so that they got the resourcing they need. They felt more included. They felt like they had a voice at the table through the regional elder. So it was about dealing with my own potential loss and my own ending in a role that I'd really enjoyed, and also really championing what I thought was the greater good for the people and the congregations that I served, because part of serving people is looking for their greater good, even if that might be at personal cost to oneself.
Thank you. Next question. How have you dealt with transition in your experience? For example, from district coordinator to elder, and possibly from elder to moderator. What has your experience been?
Well, part of it is leaving well. It's important for me to hear other people's concerns about the transition and not buy into those concerns. So, you know, leaving Northern Lights MCC, which was the most recent transition that I undertook, you know, it became clear to me that my time there was done, and so it was taking time to sit with that myself and then start to manage that process well by, first of all, talking to the board and working out the time scale and the transition and what needed to be in place, and when would be the appropriate time to tell the congregation, and also talking individually to ministry leaders. And then being very clear and open and honest with everybody about what the process would be and the fact that I would not be in touch afterwards. So, you know, honouring the commitment to actually just leave and let the congregation have time to settle and to heal and to plan and to move forward, and letting myself do that too. You know, there is sadness and loss on both sides, even when it's absolutely the right thing to do. And so really stepping back, and then also being appropriate. You know, when I stepped down as regional elder, someone else became the regional elder, and then someone else after that. And so, you know, whatever I thought of their decisions, good or bad, is, you know, not articulating that publicly, and being helpful and being seen to be supportive and helpful publicly. And if there were any situations where I felt that, you know, my advice would be welcome, then I was willing to do that, but also recognizing that my time was over and that I needed to step away and again just let go. So at the end of all of it, I think, is just acting with honesty and integrity, giving people all the information that they need, and then being supportive and not putting your two pennyworth in publicly, you know, or sometimes privately either. It's just like accepting that my time is done and it's time to let go and move on and move away myself.
Thank you. Next question. How have you grown in your understanding of places where you do and do not have privilege?
Oh, well, I would say I've grown a lot over the years. You know, looking back at situations in my past, you know, issues around working with people with disabilities, or looking at my own internalized homophobia and sexism, racism, and being more aware of that. You know, the experience of age is, you know, perhaps being more attuned more quickly to when it prickles and when it hurts, and acknowledging that, you know, and also, you know, the privilege that is afforded us when we are a reverend, when we are an elder, and how people react to us in the room, and not buying into that either, and just being appreciative of the respect that we're given and accorded because we carry a particular title, but not assuming the privilege that goes with it. Privilege also shifts. I was on a panel with an African-American clergy colleague, and he talked about his work life and his ministry, and he said, you know, in the situation he found himself in his work life as a gay African-American, he was the most privileged person in the room because of the position he held and people needing his help or needing his influence. So privilege can shift. Very interesting, I had a grey gap year. You know, I had a year of traveling, and as a middle-aged woman, I had very little privilege in some situations. I was invisible in some situations because of my age and because I was a woman. But then in other situations where age was revered, I had a great deal of privilege, and I was accorded a great deal of respect. So, you know, privilege does shift. So, you know, I think one thing is that I will be endlessly checking my privilege and finding new ways where it takes me by surprise, because that is the world we live in. And so it's not becoming immune to those little moments where you get tweaked and realize that, you know, internal sexism or internal racism or internal homophobia or anything else is actually still at play in me, and being mindful of it and shifting in behavior and attitude and language, and being willing to learn and take feedback from others.
Thank you, Cecilia. This will be the last question for the town hall tonight. We'll get to the other ones when you respond, and we post those on our webpage. This is the question. If you were elected moderator, what actions would you take before you leave Orlando to help create momentum for us?
What a brilliant question. It's a really bizarre thing, you know, that the elder candidates, the moderator candidates, are not going to be preaching, and there's wisdom in that, and I'm not questioning that decision. However, you know, sometimes we just need a good preach, and there's a bit of me that would just really want to address the whole conference and just remind us of where we're going and what we could do. I'd really want to set up some listening posts as quickly as possible. You know, so we talked about millennials earlier. You know, there may be other areas where people just want to say, you know, come and hear us, come and hear what we have to say. You know, there have been questions from our churches, particularly in South America, and that's not an area I'm familiar with, and I'd really want to hear some of the great things that we were doing, but also some of the questions and concerns. You know, there are other areas of work that we're doing that I'm not familiar with, so I'd really want to hear those. There's something about us all being in prayer together, you know, and lifting in prayer together, because prayer, all it takes is our time and energy, and I'm a great believer in prayer, and I'm a great believer in silence. So what if we just held silence together for a while, and then just let forth with what we heard and what we envisaged in that time. So I would like to have a mixture of things where it was the whole body of Christ really being in that moment together, and just how powerful we are. And you know, many of us know those experiences from previous conferences. And then I would like those smaller gatherings where I could really hear the very diverse voices that we have. And one of the things that I've always felt very blessed in is the people that you just meet and you say, should we go for a walk? Should we go for a coffee? Shall we just have that 2-minute conversation as we ride up and down in the lift or the elevator, depending on which word you use? And those are always very empowering for me at conferences. So I would also look for those little moments where God tugs on my sleeve and says, you know, here is someone who has some truth for you and you should listen to them. So I think all of those things, a combination of them, would be great to really send us all out from Orlando with you know, our passion and our commitment to our future.
Thank you so much, Cecilia, for taking the time to answer the questions. Just as a reminder to all of those who are participating in the town hall tonight, those questions that were not answered will be submitted to Reverend Elder Cecilia to respond to, and they'll be placed in a packet that will be posted on the MMC webpage. I'll turn it over back to Gavin now.
Thank you. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Reverend Elder Cecilia, for being with us and talking with us and answering questions. And I don't know about others, but I could sit here for hours listening to these questions and the answers. It's brilliant. So I'm sorry, we only have an hour, and thank you for everyone who asked questions, and we'll send those out. So as a reminder, our final Meet the Candidates webinar with all 3 candidates will be held on the 5th of June at 8 p.m. UK time. So it's very exciting for you, Cecilia, which is 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time in the US and 7 p.m. UTC for everyone else. That webinar, like all of these, will be recorded and made available on the MNC site. So if you've missed the other town hall webinars, please go and have a look at them and watch them and listen to the questions and answers. And one final thing before we close in prayer, and then Mike can show us his video, is I would really, really, really strongly ask everyone to go and read the MNC final report that we have put together. It hopefully will answer a lot of questions about the process, why we did what we did, and I hope we put a lot of information in there to hopefully make people feel more comfortable with not only the process and the slate of candidates, but the entire way that we have gone about working together as a team. So you can download it as a PDF. You can go to the MNC website and you can, it's all there, the text is all there, you can view it in different languages. And if you've got 2 hours to spare, you can watch us all read the report. Okay, so you listen to it as you drive or whatever like that. It's well worth it, let me tell you. So thank you very much. Right, so see you hopefully on the 5th of June. Thank you, Cecilia, once again. I'll close in prayer and then Mike, over to you. God of many names, we thank you for bringing us here together in this time, in this place. Thank you so much for Cecilia, her willingness to say yes to your call. And thank you for all on this call, the questions asked and the answers given. Just ask a blessing over all of MCC, over moderator candidates, and all who will come to Orlando to share their views, opinions, and votes. May your spirit be moving in, within, and for us in your Son's name. Amen. Thank you, everybody.
We are excited to announce we will once again be using electronic voting devices at the 2019 General Conference. This short video will refresh your memory or explain how the voting devices work. On Tuesday, the day of the business meeting, eligible clergy and lay delegates will look for signs directing them to different sign-in tables. Once signed in, you will be given a voting device. The device is the same size as a credit card, with 10 buttons that are used for voting. During the business meeting, a slide will be projected with numbered voting options. The slide will be projected first, but voting will not begin until the voting clerk announces that voting is now open. Once the clerk announces that voting is now open, you will press the numbered button to indicate your choice. The display screen on the voting device will briefly show your choice as it is being transmitted. If you press an ineligible button, an error will appear in the display screen. While voting is open, you can change your vote by simply pressing another choice. When the voting clerk announces that voting is now closed, no more votes will be transmitted. The results will immediately be known and once verified will be announced to the General Conference. If you have difficulty or questions during voting, there will be helpers walking the floor to assist. Following the business meeting, you will return your device as you leave the room. If you lose or do not return your device, you will be responsible for the replacement cost. If you have any other questions about General Conference or the voting devices, please email conferences@mccchurch.net. See you in Orlando at General Conference.
Thank you, everyone.